Elaine here from markergeek.com. Today I've got a card for you featuring several Stamping Bella stamp sets. It's a fairy tale themed twist and pop card. I created another card in the same style recently on my channel, but that was using the Lawnform Pivot pop-up die set. This time, because I wanted the pop-up panel on the inside to be somewhat larger to accommodate the stamps that I wanted to use, I decided to score and create my own pop-up card using some instructions I found on the Stamping Bella website. Sandy has previously, as a DT Thursday tutorial, done a twist and pop card, so I will link to that blog post in the description below, as well as showing you how I created it in this video. At the moment, I am just taking some of those stamps and stamping them using my Misty stamping tool on Make It Colour blending card, because I'm going to be Copic colouring some of these images. I will say that this video was going to be incredibly long if I included the Copic colouring, so I'm actually going to put the Copic colouring of the images up as a separate video, and that will be up on Monday. So if you want to see exactly how I coloured both the front panel and the inside pop-up, you can see that on Monday. Now that I've stamped the front panel, I'm creating the pop-up panel for the inside. I'm just using a piece of cardstock, a piece of my Make It Colour blending card, which I cut to 10 inches by 3.5 inches. And now I'm just using a ruler to mark mark where the score lines will be, as I want to do all my stamping and inking before I score the cardstock, just because it works much easier that way in terms of the stamping, and also when you're doing the ink blending with the distress oxides, it stops the ink from kind of pooling up in the score lines. So yeah, having the pencil lines there just helps me work out where the stamps are going to go. You can see I mocked up a version of this previously, and I've got all my masks laid out on that so that I could see where I wanted the stamps to go in the end. And I'm using those masks to lay out on my piece of cardstock to line my stamps up in my Misty, and I used a piece of acetate to help with that, with the positioning, because these are rubber stamps so I can't see through them. Having a piece of acetate just really helps with that. As you can see, I went ahead and did that for all of the little unicorns on the inside. Then I'm going to apply all of the masks to those and to my front panel with the little knight and princess. Oh, and I'm rubbing out those score lines now so that they don't get trapped underneath the ink blending that I'm going to do. And then I'll finish applying the masks, and then I'll be ready to start the ink blending process. As I mentioned, I'm going to be using distress oxides for this. And actually, before I get into any ink blending, I need to mask off some areas to create my background scene, because I wanted to create a little setting both on the front panel of the card and for this inside pop-up panel. I'm actually going to do some ink blending on the card base itself as well, because I wanted everything to work together and blend kind of fairly seamlessly. So now I'm taking some more Eclipse masking paper, and I'm creating I decided that I wanted to have a little path coming down from the castle, as if they were standing at the end of the path leading up to this fairy tale castle. The castle I used, by the way, is the smaller of the two castles available in the Squidgy Castle set available from Stamping Bella. Yeah, so about the path, I should really, looking at it afterwards, have made the path extend right down past where they're standing. It looks slightly odd, kind of starting just in the middle of the hill. But we'll apply some creative license and just, yeah, it's fine. the path magically starts there. But I just wanted to give some sort of impression of this being a little scene, not just a random castle at the top of a hill. So I masked off just a path. It was really easy, just basically sketch out a little path shape on some of the masking paper and then cut it to size. Then I'm creating a mask so that I can create a hill, which again, really simple, just lining it up on the panel and just kind of drawing in a curved slope, and cutting it so that I will have a piece of mask to use when I'm inking the grass for the hill, and then I've got a mask to use for where I'm to mask the hill off so that I can ink the sky, if that makes sense. And you will see me do this for the inside panel as well. It's really easy to do. It's just a basic shape. Just sketch it out on the masking paper and then cut it out. Tucking those behind, tucking the excess to the back, and now I've got my Distress Oxides. I love this combination for grass. It's Twisted Citron and Lucky Clover. And then I'm applying that with the mini ink blending tools, as you've seen me do before, no doubt. And again, as I've mentioned before, I am doing this on my Copic friendly Make It Colour blending card, but the Distress Oxides do work really nicely on it. When I do the sky, I will eventually use some water, but as long as you're fairly conservative with the amount of water you use, that works fairly well. It's not a problem. As you can see, I'm removing the mask for the sky. Now I'm applying just a mask to the hill so that I can ink the sky. I wanted to create a kind of magical look. So I used, I think it's worn lipstick, shaded lilac, and broken china to create a nice pinky purpley effect in the sky. Which looks really pretty when you apply the water droplets, which I will do after I have inked up the inside panel as well. I kind of forgot to do it before I got to that point. I think this colour combination turned out really nicely. It looks a bit weird to start with until you've kind of worked it a little bit and got that pink and the shaded, got the worn lipstick and the shaded lilac to kind of work together nicely. So it took a little bit of effort, but I think the results were worth it. Just drying it off with my heat tool, peeling off the masks for the magic. And of course I will have to reapply the castle mask and sort of mask the bottom part when I do the water droplets later on the sky. And now I'm going to move on to doing that inside panel, which I grabbed the Eclipse masking paper again, and I'm just kind of doing the same things I did on the front panel, only it's a bit longer. Kind of working out how best to do it and exactly where I wanted my hills to kind of sit, and cutting that so that again I have the mask for the sky and for the hills, so that I can create a nice kind of separation between them. And again, I'll be working with the same colour combinations of inks in the Distress Oxides so that it's all coordinating, so that it all perfectly matches when you open up the card. I will say that for this card, I kind of tried to keep the cardstock that I used for everything fairly similar. So I used, although it wasn't Make It Colour blending card that I used for the card base, it was a similar feel of card because I knew that I wanted to do the ink blending. I kind of wished that actually for the card base I had used something slightly heavier, maybe the Bristol smooth surface cardstock that I sometimes use, just because it's just slightly more flimsy than I would like. It looks great, but it's slightly more flexible and flimsy than I would prefer. So if I were making this again, I would probably use a heavier weight for the card base, and just have to live with the fact that the ink would maybe look slightly different on it, because the heavier weight cardstock that I tend to use is a different tone. It's a more natural white tone. I tried to keep these all to the brighter tone of the Make It Colour blending card, just so that it would all look very much the same. But yeah, it worked. But yeah, I'd kind of prefer that the card was a little bit stiffer, just for working with that pop-up mechanism. As you can see, I'm now kind of lining up that inside panel on the 12 by 4 piece of cardstock that I've cut for the card base. I haven't scored it yet. I'll do that when all the inking has been done. And I'm just kind of trying to create the same landscape effect on that card base so that when you open the card, it's all looks fairly seamless, or as seamless as possible. And I think that just adds to the effect, makes it look really special. There it is, all inked and with the water effect added. Now I'm scoring it at 6 inches. As I mentioned, it's 12 inches by 4 inches. So I'm scoring it at 6 inches, increasing that. And then just making sure it all looks good. And as you can already see, it all really works nicely together. Before doing any of the scoring and assembly of the card, I decided to add my sentiments. I've got one here for the front from the Unicorn Sentiment set, which says Make a Wish. I'm stamping it in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I've gone back to using this for my sentiments recently, just because it does give such a beautiful, crisp, black impression, even on top of things like the Distress Oxides. It works so much better for sentiments than the ink that I normally use for, say, stamping with Copics. Now I'm using a sentiment from one of the quote stamps from the Adventure Sentiment set, which I thought worked really nicely together with the one I used on the front, and with the general theme of the card. I love having these sentiment sets available to mix and match. So many of them work for so many different occasions. Again, I stamped that using the VersaFine Onyx Black. And I do heat set that just to make sure that it's all dry, ready for the colouring process. And when that was all done, I then moved on to colouring all of the images. As I mentioned earlier, leaving the colouring process in would have made this video epically long. So I am uploading the colouring portion of this process on Monday as my Marker Geek Monday video. So if you're interested in that, you can see it then. Now I am moving on to scoring that inside panel. The panel is, as I mentioned before, 10 inches by 3.5 inches, and it's scored every 2.5 inches to create that sort of concertina fold to go on the inside of the card. As you can see, I'm just folding it here and using my bone folder. I just think these pop-out panels just look so cute with a little scene on. Next, I'm going to create the mechanism, and that's using a piece of cardstock that is 8 inches by 3.5 inches, and you score it down the middle at 1 3/4 inches, and then mark on each side 2 and then mark on each side 2 1/4 inches from each corner. Put a little pencil mark so that you can line them up. I use my paper trimmer for this because I find it easier to line up because there's only one score line. Score the diagonals, then mountain fold along that middle score line, and then fold in along both of the diagonal score lines, and then it makes it flexible so that you can push it all together to create this shape. Crease it really well with the bone folder, and then it's time to apply the adhesive. I used score tape for this. You just want to make sure that you use a really strong adhesive. I don't often use tape. As I've mentioned before, I usually like to use liquid glue because I tend to like to be able to shift things around a little bit. I used score tape for this just to make sure that it was really held in there and would stand up to being played with. Once all the adhesive is applied, I did poke a hole through the centre of the piece. As on the Lawn Fawn pivot pop-up die, there is a little hole which helps you to line it up with that central score line on the card. Got it all lined up, removed the backing from the adhesive on one of the triangles, and then got it stuck down. Then removed the adhesive from the other side and closed the card so that that would all adhere nicely. And then on this one, obviously as I've created this one, it doesn't have like the little arms that the die has. You could probably cut a couple of the corners off. You only want to apply adhesive in 2 opposite corners to adhere the internal panel to. This does make it is slightly bulkier than the version created with the die, as this piece is larger, and also I haven't removed the unused bottom panels of that mechanism, but it works really nicely. Much like the die version, you do need to play with it. Once you've put it all together, you do need to play with it a little bit, just to kind of loosen it all up and sort of make it flexible. For the first several times that you play with it, it will catch. The mechanism will kind of get a little bit caught and it needs kind of coaxing back into position. But once you've played with it for a while, it does free up and just work nicely. Now that I've assembled all of that, and as you can see, the panel and the background on the inside of the card just makes it look so much more finished. It makes it sort of blend in seamlessly. I really like how that came out. It's worth doing. Now I'm adhering the front panel with my favourite Fabri-Tac adhesive, and that's it. I did off camera end up adding some Tonic Nouveau glitter drops to the front of the card, as you will see in the photos. And as I said, the colouring portion of this card making process will be up on Monday. Thank you for joining me today. If you enjoyed, please do like and subscribe, and I will catch you next time.